Welcome to Fragmented, a software developer podcast where we talk about building good software and becoming better developers. My name's Donn Felker.
And I'm Kaushik Gopal.
Welcome to the show. Hey everybody, before we get going, I wanted to tell you about a brand new resource that I released. It's called Mastering Git. It is a free Git course that will teach you everything that you need to know on how to use Git from the ground up in less than 120 minutes. It's super easy to follow. You don't need any specific tools installed other than Git itself. I'll teach you everything you need to know from the ground up using the command line and the 20% of commands that are going to give you over 80% of the benefits for you and your day-to-day engineering career. Now, there's a ton of Git commands out there. You may not be sure which ones you should use. I've been using Git for over 12 years now from the command line, and these are the distilled down commands that I use on a day-to-day basis. I'm going to show you how to use each one of those, from initializing repositories, making commits, how to create branches, conceptually what are branches, how do they work, branch naming strategies, how to merge, how to utilize merge tools, how to handle merge conflicts, how to merge branches, how to create pull requests on things like GitHub, how to cherry pick, how to view logs, how to create aliases, and so forth. I cover all of that within this course. There's no fluff in it. We hop straight into it, and you're going to learn everything that you need to know in order to become a master of Git. Again, there's not a lot of commands that you're going to learn. This is the course that I wish that I had when I started. Doesn't matter if you're a beginner or if you're advanced, you're going to learn something for this. However, if your team member is new, or you're just learning Git, or you want to be able to kind of understand it better, this is the course for you. So check it out. The link is going to be in the show notes. You can also view it at donnfelker.com/git. You'll be able to see a nice demonstration of what is inside of that course on that page, and it'll link you directly to the actual video itself, which is free on YouTube. So you can also visit my YouTube channel, which is going to be at donnfelker.com/YouTube. You can find it there too. So again, go to donnfelker.com/git for the free Git course and learn Git and master it. And I really hope that it helps you. Let's hop into the show. All right, Kaushik, we just hit record here just a few seconds ago, and this is kind of meta for the podcast, but we had a couple of other topics in mind, and then we just started rambling like we usually do before the call, and we decided, you know what, we better just probably record this.
Yeah. It's one of those moments where we're like, okay, like, no, really, we should just hit record now.
Yeah. So to get back in the conversation for folks that, of course, you weren't here before, we were talking about, when we get on a call, we always say, hey, how you doing? How's your morning? All that kind of, small talk to get things going. And I told Kaushik that.
Oh, wait, I got to tee this up because I think I got a good one.
Okay.
So for the first time, folks, like for people who follow Donn, he is serious about his workouts. Like, you don't joke, right? And for the first time, like we started this call and Donn mentioned, hey, I missed a workout today. And I'm like, oh my God, what happened? Like, did you, are you okay? Are you unwell? Did something happen? And that's how the conversation kicked off. So tell us, Donn, why did you miss your workout today?
Exactly. So background on for that. I normally work out in the morning, anywhere from 6 to 9 in the morning is during that time frame. Sometime I'll work out. And this morning I thought, you know what, I'm going to push the workout to be a little bit later this morning because I have some code that I'm working on. It's actually some Ruby stuff, and for a couple projects that I have, and I'm making some marketing sites. And I was like, well, I need to upgrade something. And long story short, to make a really long story short, I have spent way too long trying to upgrade this one particular static site generator from one version of a CSS framework to another version of a CSS framework because the build process changed. And I burned all morning on it, and I didn't get to work out. Now, let me preface that with, does that mean I'm not going to work out? No, I will still work out after work. So I will get it done. It'll happen later today. But my whole day has been thrown off simply because I couldn't tell myself to stop. And as I told you, Kaushik, about 45 minutes, maybe an hour ago, I had to get up out of my desk and basically yell at myself and kind of detach myself from the situation and say, what are you doing? You are burning all of this time upgrading this one project for what reason? Like, I could just go use a different static site generator that's already solved this problem. Why am I doing this? And it's because I get so involved into the problem that it becomes fun. And
Oh,
you
yeah.
mentioned that you had this happen recently with your stuff too.
I did. And it's funny that feeling. I think over time with, maturity and
Mhm.
having spent time, it's gotten better. But you know how much it's gotten better? Previously, I used to lose myself completely where I start working on a problem. Next thing I know, 4 hours later, I'm like knee deep. And it's only become better insofar as that I still spend the 4 hours, but every hour is agonizing because in my mind, I'm like, oh, I probably shouldn't be doing this. I probably
Yep.
shouldn't be doing this, but it's so much fun. So I'm just going to keep doing it. I had a very similar experience because there's this unidirectional state flow app that I put out. It's like this basic movies app some time back,
Mhm.
and we'll definitely talk about this
Yep.
in another episode. But I wanted to work on something where I was like composing versus inheriting, so I worked on that. That spent a whole chunk of time, and then now I'm looking to upgrade it in other ways, which again, like I said, we'll follow up in a future episode about. But it's that feeling where you only have like 30 minutes left. But in your mind, you have just like the adrenaline. You're like, I'm just going to push through this 30 minutes because I feel I just need that moment. Like, that 30 minutes is going to get me like 60% of the way. Those 30 minutes get over, but obviously those 30 minutes are not enough, right?
Mhm.
And then you think to yourself, well, no, just another 30 more minutes. Like, I'm almost there. I know I'm there. You spend the 30 minutes. And the truth is, you might actually cover quite the amount of work, right? Like, in those 30 minutes, you're probably more productive than like the 1 hour before, but it doesn't get done, right?
Yeah.
And if it doesn't get done, it means you're going to come back to it anyway, right?
And
So is it worth it? Like, that's the question, right? And I mean, to be clear, I have zero answers here, right? It's not like I've done this and this works, but it is interesting because when you described it, it's so visceral in my mind. Like, I know
Mhm.
exactly that feeling that was going through your head when you had to like burn those extra few minutes, right?
Yeah. And that time when you say, like, well, I'm just going to put the 30 more minutes, or I'm going to do it. Like for me, I'm just going to use this extra hour and I'll get it done. And I didn't get it done. And if I look back at where I started versus where I am now, I'm no further along than where I was at 4:15 this morning when I woke up. Like, and to me, that just like, as you know me as someone who's I optimize all my time. It's just like, it chaps me, it burns me so bad because like, where did all this time go? But it's like, and like you said, I really don't have an answer for it. The one thing that it does a couple of things for me though. One is it shows me what I still truly love about this field. It's that feeling of getting into a flow state of solving a problem. And again, it doesn't matter what technology is. It could be whatever. It's whatever you're interested in. Diving deep in this problem, solving it, and just the time melts away. Like you said, it could be an hour, 4 hours, half a day, a whole day. The problem is, like you said, that I get to so that's the good part. The bad part is I eventually have to stop and do regular work, and I have to pay the bills and go to work and clients or whatever. And that is the hard part for me because now there's two things at that point that happen. One is it's always in the back of my head that I didn't finish this thing. And there's like this background process. It's just constantly running. I'm like, maybe it's this, maybe it's this, maybe it's that. No, maybe it's this, maybe you didn't try this. And then I'm thinking about it while I'm eating lunch or I'm taking a shower or I'm in a meeting and I'm thinking about this problem. And I'm like,
you're like eyeing it from the corner of your eye. You're like, maybe if I just try that, like, what about that?
Yeah. And so that's the real negative part is it can consume a lot of resources mentally, even subconsciously. Now, the positive aspect, there's a flip side to that coin too. The positive aspect of it is I call it pulls me forward. And what that means is I now know that there's something later tonight or tomorrow morning that I need to work on. And I might write a note about, so I kind of snapshot my thought process. And then I know tomorrow morning or whatever, when I can work on this again, here's where I'm going to start because here's the situation I'm going to work on. But we can go even a little deeper in this. The other problem with it is I don't know if I'm going to get that time because I don't have a lot of time.
Yeah. No, I hear you. There's like so many things I want to follow up on that, right? So there's the one thing is like, one strategy that's worked for me partially, again, like I said, it's only if I follow it, right? And it's really hard to follow it. It's like this concept of time boxing, right? Which isn't like anything new, but it's that like, it's funny when I was in school, like, this is college. I even remember his name. There was this software developer, really nice guy. His name was George Dean. He studied at Pivotal Labs and he was a student with me. And, Pivotal Labs is like they're gung ho. Like there's this consultancy that, I mean, obviously you probably have heard of them. That are gung ho about agile programming, right? Sorry, not even agile. It's extreme programming, XP, like, the extreme programming. So one of the core tenets of extreme programming is this idea of time boxing, right? You say you have 30 minutes, you pair with someone else, you do 30 minutes, that's it. Like, and it was funny. And I keep remembering this experience because there was this time where, we were a group, like, because in college there's group settings and you work on assignments together, right? And he would be like our time, like, table scheduler, like, and he would say, hey, time box it, right? And it was so crazy because he's like, look, we're going to spend 30 minutes on this first section. We would literally be one sentence or two sentences away from just completing that section, right? Because we're like, hey, we worked on this, like, oh, geez, let's just get it done and be like, move forward. And he was brutal. He was like military with it, right? He's like, no, like, the time box means no sense because you'll spend like an extra few minutes. That's going to happen a little again in the next section. In the end, we're going to do a piss poor job of like the final section, right? And he's like, no, the strategy was spend that time for each section, get it done and move on, right? And in the end, this is what your planning process resulted, right? So if you want to do it better luck next time because, this strategy will completely crumble if you don't respect the process, right? And that always stuck with me. I will admit I'm not good at it by any stretch of the imagination, right? Like I keep reminding myself, and the times I adhere to that sort of mindset, things get done, right? And I'm always net happier, like in terms of like, what I achieved. Usually that always ends up being the process. Another quick tip that helps is like, if you have like an Apple Watch or something, it's like the whole Pomodoro timer thingy. I don't necessarily follow it in that section, but what I do is I keep running 25-minute cycles, right? Like anytime I'm starting to sense, I'm like, oh, I'm getting into that zone again, like, into the flow state, which is like the positive connotation to it. But basically this thing's going to suck an entire like few hours for me. Yeah. I keep running 25-minute timers. More so like I'm still going to like probably like work for another 2 hours or something, right? But those 25-minute cycles almost forces me to like recognize the number of time blocks that are being spent, right? So I'm like, hey, in 1 hour, that's 4 time blocks, right? So I spent 4 cycles on this. Okay, I'm going to spend another 2. And that almost inherently like forces me to check in, right? So again, that's one thing I found. So strategies, if people are better at following it, it might work. But anyway, so that's with the whole time boxing approach. Have you found yourself like using some of these strategies, or are you inherently just better at saying, no, this is on my calendar, I'm getting it done?
No, the time box strategy is, it's a core component of how I operate my life. And in fact, I'm very, very good at it. I'm almost militaristic, just like you are. I mean, your friend was. And that's exactly what I would do is I would say, all right, I'm going to spend an hour, 2 hours, whatever on this. And then if I can't come to a solution, I'm going to option B, which is try something else. And in fact, I actually did that this morning. I said, all right, I'm going to work for until this, I think it was like 9:15, 9:30 in the morning. Or I don't know, whatever. I'm just making the time up. But this particular time, and then if I can't get it, I'm going to try another option. And that's what I did. And then I tried another option. But then something weird happened. I tried the other option worked. And I'm like, okay, knowing in my mind, I should go with option B now because it already worked in 10 minutes. I'm like, all right, I'm not going to burn another 2 hours and this other thing doesn't work. I'll use option B and stuff. For some reason, I have this, I had this emotional attachment to the old thing that I was working on. It's almost like it beat me. And I'm like that, and I'm like, I can figure this out. I know I can figure this out. And it's not that hard. I can get it. And so for some reason, I went against everything that I normally do, and I went back to it, and I burned another hour and a half on it. And again, I'm in the same place that I was at before. And I finally had to stop when I got up an hour ago and yelled at myself. It's like, what are you doing? And I closed the IDE. I closed everything. I'm like, you are not doing that. Like, Donn, you are not touching that. Like, that's dead to you. You're not, it's done. So time boxing is something that I do very heavily. I really like that you brought up the Pomodoro technique because my friend, it was about a year ago. He is really productive. And I asked him, like, how do you do it? Like, how do you get so much stuff done? I'm like, I get a lot done. He's like, I'm like, but you're on another level from me. And he plans his day every Sunday. And he actually uses a tool called Kanban Flow, which is a website. And Kanban flow. It looks just like Trello or similar. And he renames the columns like Sunday through Saturday. And then he plans his days in Pomodoros. And he goes, now I don't use, he's like, I know it might take me 4 hours to do this one thing, or I'm going to plan for 4 hours. He goes, but that's just like you said, those are the blocks of time that I can use to manage my day. And he goes, I've done this long enough to know now. He goes, I can only schedule anywhere from 6 to 10 blocks of time. He goes, and those are 25-minute blocks. He goes, so we're looking at 3 to 6 hours I can schedule per day. He goes, everything else is just life's going to throw at me, and I'm not going to be able to get it done.
Right.
He goes,
and I think the key is also that, right? Like knowing how many of those cycles can you get done. Because that, unless you keep doing it, fail, learn, like you're not going to know. And that can get very disheartening too, right?
It is. And I attempted to use that system for about 6 months. And it was interesting because I would set up my schedule on Sunday and I'd make it till about Wednesday. And then he said, look, you're going to make it to Wednesday or Thursday. And then you're going to have to like reshuffle or forget what, or retrue it or something like that. And it's basically, you got to go back into your plan and readjust it because life has happened. And I noticed I had to do that, but I had a hard time the last part of the week to really get in the flow then. It was always the beginning of the week that I was better at, but to really rewind it here. Yeah, it's everything goes back to time boxing and Pomodoro and being able to manage that time. But there's something to be said about, which I mentioned before, is getting what I call the madness when you're working in something.
Right. So let's talk about that. Yeah. With the madness, right? So how do you like sort of peel yourself off of that feeling? Because you said you're good about like time boxing, right? Do you actually make that judgment call where you're like, okay, I'm 10 minutes away from getting this done, right? Do you just think to yourself, nope, cutting it off now and I will like allocate more time in the future? Or are you like, in the grand scheme of things, I want this to be done so that I can move on to other things? And how do you plan that, right? Like, or do you plan for the entire day? Because I struggle a lot with that, right? Where I'm like, well, I think I can push forward with this.
That's a really difficult one to answer simply because it depends on what's happening. And it's really hard to force myself into the madness state. And what is the madness state? It's almost like the deepest flow state that you can find. It's like you're almost crazy. You're almost you're in the machine.
It's manic, basically.
Yeah, it's very manic, and you're just everything's flowing perfectly, or maybe things aren't flowing perfectly, but you're chipping away at the issue. How do I know when to stop in those situations? For me, I find it the most psychologically beneficial when I can reach a point where I kind of have everything mapped out in my head of where I want to go. I know the current problem right now. Like, oh, I've identified the problem. I know what I need to do to fix it, or I've already fixed it and I know what's next. I can then stop, then make a note, whatever, and then I can come back to it tonight or tomorrow, whatever, and that's fine. I have a hard time when I'm in the middle of something and something's broken or not working and I almost have it figured out, but I don't know what the issue is yet. That's when I have a hard time leaving it alone. When it's in a completely broken state and I don't know why.
That is interesting. That is a very mature way of thinking about it. Because if you know what the unknown, if the unknown becomes known, then at that point you're like, well, the next time I come at it, I know I'm going to be able to get it done. As against where it's like, well, I don't know.
Yeah, I can plan for it because then at that point I can create a plan of a procedure of here's the next steps. I can move forward, and there's a linear progression of where I'm going to go next. But when I am in a forest of problems and I don't know which way is out. It's a very disheartening and not fearful, but it's a very like uneasy feeling of like, all right, well now I'm out of time. I have to go do other responsibilities. And now I just kind of have to push this thing to the side and it just kind of gnaws at you all day long, you know?
Oh yeah. And I mean, to be clear, that madness feeling, it sounds like, we're complaining and stuff, but obviously I hope people get it. I'm very grateful that, I get to do something where I'm being paid for, like even if I wasn't paid for this stuff, if I wasn't paid to be a programmer, I'd probably still, approach it with the same level of like, craziness, so to speak. Right. And I'm very grateful for that. But, the whole point is like, how do we sort of strike that healthy balance between like, driving yourself to that madness state, but also learning now's the time to like sort of cut it off. Right. Because I had the same thing yesterday. Like I was up until like maybe 12 or 1 and I had to wake up at 6 again this morning. And I'm like, I know as at 10:30, 11, I'm like, oh boy, I know what's happening now.
Yeah.
But and it's just like, I'm like, but I can't take myself out of this, right? And yeah, so I feel there are some aspects of that need to be sort of like figured out.
I think
Moving back to your sorry, go ahead.
And everybody's different too. I think, or I feel for me, I have understood where I have to draw certain lines in my life. Half the time I have my kids out there, half the time I don't. And when I have them with me, I know at a certain time of day, like I have to stop. I've got to go make dinner. I've got to go do things with them. But when I don't have my kids and, I live alone here, they'll come home for school, do whatever, and then they're off. And I'll sit there and work, and all of a sudden I'll look up and it'll be 9:00 at night and I've been in the computer for like 18 hours. Like I'm just like,
oh, wow. Yeah.
Where did this entire day go? So knowing like when you can do that and when you can is important too.
Yeah. That's an important point. And as like, with time, because in the early days when I was just like this single bachelor who had all the time in the world, like I think a lot of my unhealthy habits have developed, right? You don't have the luxury of doing that. Like, today, if you have a family and, you need to, like you said, pay the bills, like cook dinner, like, get like all of those things done, you shower and like make sure you're ready for the day. And like those things take time, and yeah, it's so funny because I feel that balance is so hard to strike, at least for me. You mentioned the Kanban flow thing, right? Like, do you do something like that? Do you map your entire week, or do you start like, okay, today, these are the things I'm going to get done? I'm just curious about some of that tactical stuff and tools that you use.
Yeah. So previously I'll say this. I've been experimenting with various different ways, and there's two ways that I've found that have worked for me. One is the way I've always done it, which is I journal every morning. I write down the top 5 things I want to get done every day. And then after that, I have a longer like brain dump list of like, here's the other things I need to get done. Now, the top 5 things are going to be things that push me forward in maybe my career, my work, whatever. Maybe it's a habit I need to develop. Maybe I'm trying to get into working out. So I'm going to work out for 20 minutes today. Those are things I got to get done. And then the other list are the things that I want to get done, or I need to get done, like, hey, call the dentist, or, make sure I, go to the store, blah, blah, blah. That has worked okay for me, but it's very off the cuff and just very immediate. And
so loose structures are
very, very loose. And I've always felt like I don't know what the rest of this week's coming up. And then by the time Friday rolls around, I'm like, I didn't get the things done I wanted to get done. And so I moved over to this weekly planning methodology. And like I said, I did that starting last year. And I think I did it for probably 6 to 8 months. And I got progressively better and better and better and better at it. And I was highly productive. This is when I was putting out a bunch of YouTube videos. This is when I was putting out, training courses, constant content on different platforms, email newsletters, writing code and projects. And my output was just amazing. So it really helped me solidify my time there. And then I fell off that to try to do more of a loose structure in the morning. All right, what if I just focus in the morning and then kind of segregate my day in morning and night? That has worked okay. But what I'm finding, and it's funny, we even brought this up because we didn't plan on this, is earlier this week, I actually wrote down in my journal here that I need to get back to the planning method where I list everything out, because I have so many things that I want to do that I have to prioritize them. I'll put them all on this Kanban board and I'll realize I'm like, I have too much stuff here. Like, I just don't have enough time. And then I have to prioritize, like, which one of these is the most important to me? I'm like, okay, that's a really cool thing, but it's a shiny object. Like, I'm just not going to be able to go learn Rust today. So, or for whatever.
I'm not going to be able to try out a new terminal shell and make sure all my aliases work.
Yeah. So to me, I've moved back to, it's on my plan this week to move back to weekly planning. And actually on my list today is to plan out the rest of my week. So kind of get a latter half of the week head start onto the next week. So if that makes sense, and then I'll start replanning again on Sunday. But that's how I do it. Do you do anything for yourself regarding planning?
So it's interesting. I just recently wrote a blog post about it on productivity.
Oh, really?
And just like how, The funny thing I found is I don't have too much trouble with the daily and the weekly stuff, right? Like, because I use whatever, like, I use things, this app, I throw it in there. I feel I get stuff done. What I found though is because I've also, like, we talk about a lot of how we are getting like more productive. And I found that I was good. I mean, I was getting stuff done, like the tasks that come in there, my inbox isn't growing. It isn't getting like too crazy. But like one of the challenges I had is I was missing that bigger picture in the process, right? Because it just feels like I'm in this like continuum, right? Like I'm constantly, things are coming at me, I'm getting them done, but I don't know where I'm heading. Like, I'm really missing like whatever the forest for the trees.
Okay, yeah.
And so that's one thing that I've tweaked where I actually have monthly goals, right? Because I know what my yearly goals are because I'm like, look, this year, this is what I planned, right? And inevitably, if I'm not keeping a track of that, my daily tasks don't necessarily land up there, right? And I feel that connect was missing. So what I've done now is I actually even have monthly goals. I'm like, look, start of the month, I kind of do a retrospective of like, okay, I thought I'd attempt to get these things done, but I didn't. So let's make sure, like, do I care about this enough? Like, okay, let's put it to the next month, right? And eventually if something gets carried over for too long, then I'm like, well, you're fooling yourself, right? Or alternatively, I'm like, no, like, I need it. I want to hit this yearly goal. And like, we're, half the year in, like it's June or July.
Don't remind me.
Yeah. Yeah. I know, right? It's crazy. Time moves pretty fast. But yeah, so, and then I'm like, oh shit, it's like half the year now. I've literally not started on this thing that I've wanted and I believed is good for me, for my career or whatever, like, is something that I need for my personal health. And so I feel that connect has made it much better. I mean, this is month 2, but I feel it's so much better because I feel it's intentional. Like as it keeps reminding me why I'm doing what I'm doing. And if I get lost in doing like the daily stuff, it catches me like, where I'm like just doing things without it progressing. And I've interestingly,
that's the monthly thing that you're okay.
Yeah, the monthly sort of like retro, so to speak, right?
Okay.
Before I start the month, I'm like, okay, this is my goal. And then every month, I actually put it in my blog, but I mean, I don't publicize it as much. But the idea is I do a retro to say, okay, I thought I'll get 4 of these things done. How many of these did I get done? And I put a check mark. If I don't get it done, I'm like, well, no. And so it's almost a reminder, right? And it's nice because I can go back and look at the months and say, okay, so that thing has been carrying over for some time,
Yeah.
That has helped me, and that's how like a lot of these things came, like the whole movies app that I was talking about, right? It was always in my mind that I was like, oh, I wanted to get these 2 things done. I know it'll be good. It's been like a few years since I gave the presentation and I've had these ideas in my mind. I have like tons of people reaching out and saying, oh, what about X? And I'm like, well, I didn't update that app, but this is how you do it. And I kept doing it enough. And I'm like, what am I doing? I should just spend the time, update the app. It'll be good for me. It'll be good for like, the community.
Yeah.
And so that's when I'm like, no, I got to get it done. Like I can't, this has been carrying over for too long. And so that's helped me, at least in terms of getting these. I know it doesn't like necessarily point directly to the getting into the madness or like, that flow state, but weirdly it drives me towards like, that sense of urgency is instilled.
How do you, a couple things here. So to backpedal, you said you really don't struggle with the day-to-day or the week-to-week stuff. How do you stay focused on what you need to do on that day or that week? And kind of as an ancillary question to that, do you reference your monthly goals every day, or how often do you look back at that kind of stuff to keep you on track throughout the days?
Yeah, not every day, but like mostly at the end of the week, right? It's irregular. Some days I check it more often. Having it accessible was like a big thing. That's why I even like put it on like, my blogging engine, because I'm like, well, I'm walking, I'm just taking a walk, or like, I'm going for a run. I'm like, like, how am I doing on that? And was there anything else that I want to check in? Just pull it up. It's easy to sort of, so it isn't regular, but what I definitely do is every day in the morning, I'm pretty diligent about, okay, what did I plan to get done today? And there are like some of these small techniques that you pick up along the way, right? For example, a common thing that I've found like a lot of people do is when you have a to-do list, right? And you aim for 5 things, you got 4 done, and one translates over to the next day.
Yeah.
And you don't think you have the time to do it on that day. It's very common for people to want to have the tendency to sort of want to pick, oh, I'm not going to get it done today, but I will actually schedule it for the future. Like I'll have it done like 3 days from now, or like, next week, I know I can get it done. I found that hurts me a lot, because eventually what happens is these start to gather like, steam. And I have like a whole bunch of these tasks that I've planned for the future. And it comes like an avalanche, right? Because then what I find is every day tasks are coming at me, like versus me intentionally picking what I'm doing today. I don't know if that makes sense. It just gets really hard when I open up and I look at like the stuff that I want, like, I open up my today list of tasks and I see 20 things because, I remember I said I'll do that today, but I said that last week, but things have changed, and so what I found is I'm very good about organizing my projects and putting my tasks in there, but I'm very, very strict with picking due dates. Like literally, either I should lose money, it should affect my health, or it should affect somebody else's health. Like that's how I sort of do. That's the rule of thumb where I'm like, only then do I put a due date. Like, if I don't go to the dentist, something's going to happen, right? Like if I don't pay this bill on time, like, I'm going to get charged a penalty.
It's a physical or the two F's, physical or that's a PH. I can't spell the physical or financial.
I know. It's like So I found those techniques help me with the daily and the weekly. I forget what your other question was, but basically I check in mostly at the end of the week. Like weekends are a good time. So it's something similar, but I'm not as, in the weekend, I usually try to, it's more a daily process for me. So by the end of the week, I kind of have a sense of, okay, what needs to happen. But I do referring to the monthly thing really helps, because then if I have like 4 of these goals that I want to get done in the month and week 1 is over, I'm like, well, 1 down, 3 more to go, right? Or whatever. Like that's, or 2 weeks are up. I'm like, hey, I only have the next half of the month. I know I'm going to not like hit this. So it sort of like forces me to get that bigger picture.
That makes sense. I think that retro is something I need to incorporate because I'm part of a couple, I call them, they're business mastermind groups, and we meet monthly to come talk about business goals, personal goals, family goals. And, basically it's almost like a retrospective for your life, and there are people that keep you accountable. And one of the things that we had inside of ours is like, all right, what's our yearly goal? And then we recently changed it to what's our monthly goal, because that was the yearly goal was, it's important, but it was so far out there that it was just hard to wrap your hands around.
Oh yeah.
But a monthly goal is like, all right, what am I going to, before I talk to you guys again in a month, here's what I'm going to get done, or here's the goal. And I think that's important. And I think for me, I know I would probably have, you probably do too. You have multiple things you want to get done in a month. Is that correct?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
It's not a little too much sometimes, but yeah. No, but again, that's the learning process. But
how do you handle when you have, or what do you do when you find out you have too many things you want to do? Do you just prioritize, or do you eliminate backlog? What?
Yeah, ruthless prioritization, right? I'm like, well, I'm not going to get that done. Throw it into the backlog. If it's that important, it'll come at me. It'll start gnawing at me in a future date, and I'll get back to it. Because right now, these are the 4 or 5 most important things, right? For example, like one of the other things, just simple stuff. Like I mentioned like the whole like the movies app thing. That's one. Wanting to learn coroutines and start to like actually get more traction towards it. That's another one. The other one's on the personal side, which is like, I recently purchased a home. I wanted to make, like, there's some aspects of it where I want to make smart, like, add a smart home, because it's really frustrating when I have 4 apps that take care of things and I want to work on something that'll get it done. Again, that was a yearly goal, but because I've not had monthly check-ins, it's just one of those things where I'm like, yeah, I'll get it done over the year. But here we are, like, half of the year, and I didn't intentionally track towards it. So after having these monthly things, I'm like, no, I'm going to get at least this portion done. That'll and none of this is like revolutionary, right? It's just that the monthly check-in I found is just the right amount for me to get perspective.
And then, to kind of bring this back full circle, how do you feel when you have those, the moments of madness and you're 3 or 4 hours in? Is that monthly goal in the back of your mind? Is that what's gnawing at you? Like, I can't be spending this much time on this right now, or what?
Truthfully, if you have a family, they will let you know.
True.
So, the madness piece I struggle with, right? Because there's an interesting aspect to that. What I've noticed, and I'm actually curious about like asking you this question too. I cannot get into that madness zone every single day. Like, I burn out. Like, it's just completely, maybe if I'm having a good streak 2 weeks, like every day, I'm like, oh, this is awesome. But by the end, I'm just brain zonked, right?
Mhm.
So I am curious, like, have you found a way to keep yourself inspired to go into this like madness zone or not? But quickly to answer your other question, inevitably what happens, right, is if I'm supposed to meet someone, we're supposed to meet friends, or like, we have to cook dinner or something, and I get into these madness zone, like this madness zone, and I'm not able to pluck myself out of it. Because it doesn't like the monthly goals, like, a day in the grand scheme of things, I can like sort of recover, right? But for that day, like, if I have to get other things done and I get caught up in some like, this flow zone and I don't keep a track of time, it like other things suffer, right, in the process. And that sort of keeps me in check.
Mhm.
But I am curious, like, do you find yourself being able to go into like, this flow state / madness zones more often? Like, have you been able to sort of say, no, I am going to do this and I'm going to get into that zone? Like, how does the inspiration part of that work, if that makes sense?
Corey House, he's a JavaScript developer. He's a friend of mine. He said something once. It was this is probably 10 years ago. He told me this actually. He told it to me over a call. I was talking about writing a blog post, and he said, and I was like, you know what? I think I'm going to do it tomorrow. And he goes, don't do it tomorrow. He goes, do it. He's like, when are you inspired to do it? I'm like, right now. And he goes, as soon as you're off this call, do it right now. I'm like, why? He goes, inspiration is perishable. And I'm like, what do you mean? He goes, well, how many times have you said, hey, I'm going to write that blog post, or I'm going to do this one thing, and then you write it down, and then you have the time to do it, and you're like, I don't want to do this right now. And he goes,
so true. That is so true.
And he goes, just do like Hemingway style. He said, and this is just for a blog post. He goes, just sit down and just get the thought out. It could be a rant, whatever. You just get it out. Time box yourself 10, 20, 30 minutes, get it out. He goes, so in those situations, like it's important you're inspired to be in a flow state, but that happens only now and then. And the inspiration has to be from something else. If it's, hey, I have to refactor a bunch of code from a legacy thing into something else, like I'm not really too inspired to go do that. Like at that point, it relies on discipline. Like, all right, now I need to force myself into a state. And for me, I have a few triggers, and this kind of goes back to the Atomic Habits, which is the Atomic Habits book by James Clear. And what are the triggers that I use? For me, it's music, it's environment, and so forth. And so I like to have it to be dark in the room. I like to have headphones on. I like to put on electronic music that doesn't have words. And then I like to put on something like Coffitivity or whatever. I combine audio inputs, and I'm able to turn off the rest of the world. I close Slack, I close everything, and all right, here's the problem. And then I just dive into the problem. And about 10, 15, 20 minutes later, usually I'm pretty in depth into the problem. The issue comes up there if the only time I can do that is if I know I have a chunk of time that's 2 hours to 4 hours in time, if that's how long the task is going to take me. If I've got a meeting in 45 minutes, I can't get into that because it'll break up the whole flow state. And that gets into the whole Paul Graham makers versus managers essay. Remember that one?
Oh, yeah. Makers versus builders or something.
Yeah, something like that. And for me, it's mainly just trying to do stuff that, given the time constraints that I have, that will work within that. So if I know I only have 30 to 40 minutes, I might just change what I'm doing. Instead of like, all right, I'm going to write this code. I got to do this, but I have that time this afternoon. Instead, I'm going to go over to my email and clean out a bunch of email, go do some code reviews that I have time to do, because that's going to fit into what I have until I have this meeting at 12 or whatever. Kind of really depends at that point. And then on the last part of it is it really depends on what I'm working on too. Like if I am doing work for, work or client or whatever, that's going to be different than it is if I'm working on my own thing or if I'm writing my own blog. So it's the time, the context in which I'm working in, and then what I'm actually working on. So it really depends on all those things. I don't really know if I answered the question, but
no, for sure. You give some nuggets there. Inspiration is perishable. I like that quote a lot. Like, it resonates so much for me because it's the same thing. When I have the inspiration for something and I have the time to do it, usually that gets done. Like, a majority of that task gets done right away. So that's something that's stuck.
It's hard though, because if you're inspired to do something right now and you have to go into a meeting, like that's just a bummer. Like there's nothing you can do about it. Like I am not going to be super inspired to go sit in this meeting where we talk about something that's just not what I'm, you have to do what you have to do. But it's one of the things we talked about at the beginning. I wanted to really kind of pull us back into was I don't think that the madness and what we talked about is a bad thing, but at all. I think it's a good thing. And in fact, it's one of the things that helps, like you said, it showcases why we enjoy what we're doing. And it's, if you can find something in your job, your day-to-day work that will put you into that state more often, I feel that you're just going to become happier every single day. So
100%. And it's not just programming, right?
No.
Like, it can be with anything. I've had similar situations where, I'm working on like some audio editing or like some sound or some music snippet. I can easily spend a few hours in that very similar sort of state. So this isn't necessarily just for programming or like software engineering. It could be anything, right?
Yeah, you could be designing, you could be fiddling with Photoshop or Figma or whatever.
Right. I think that's a lot of useful information, and I think it helps sort of convey the mindset. It's also nice to hear, at least like from someone like you who's, I'm not saying this to blow smoke up, I think you're an extremely productive person. So to see you say, hey, I struggle with this and I'm trying to figure things out is nice, because it makes us feel like, okay.
I struggle with it all the time, man. I don't think it's, I probably don't even say it enough. There's days where I just have my head in my hands and it's like, I didn't get anything done today, or I just don't feel productive at all. And I look back at the end of the day and nothing happened. And I think those days are just going to happen. You can't crush it every day,
That's true. Before we wind it down, any other last thoughts on this? Anything you want to, like, any parting words, wisdom?
No, not really. I think it's just everybody's going to have their own course here, and just know that you're going to have those days where everything just doesn't go according to plan, and that's just how it goes. What about you?
I like that. I'm going to build off of that. And I think part of what I struggled with in the early days is thinking that there's one system. There is no one system. You just got to find a system that works specifically for you. And also maybe, a system that works for that time that you are in your life, right? The system I used 5 years ago won't work today. And probably the system I use today won't work 5 years from now. So I think us just like being forgiving of ourselves and accepting that is the reality will probably make us more productive in the process.
Completely agree, man.
All righty. Thank you all so much for listening. Donn, where can we reach you again?
You can find me on Twitter or Instagram at Donn Felker. And Kaushik, how can we and everyone else get a hold of you?
Same places. Kaushik Gopal. That would be my handle. We'll have all of that in the show notes. All right. Catch you later, Donn.
See ya. Thanks for listening, everybody. Before you get going, don't forget to check out my free course on Git. This is going to be the course that shows you everything that you need to know in order to get started. It is the 80-20 of Git. You'll learn the 20% of commands are going to give you well over 80% of the benefit. Heck, I'd even say over 90% of the benefit. In fact, these are the commands that I use every single day, and I rarely step out of these boundaries. To learn more and to watch the course, you can go to donnfelker.com/git or just go to donnfelker.com/YouTube and check it out there for free. I really hope you enjoy it.
That's it for the show, folks. Fragmented is hosted by Donn Felker and me, Kaushik Gopal. We edit and produce all the episodes here on Fragmented. You can find more Fragmented episodes at fragmentedpodcast.com. Thanks for listening, and we will catch you in the next episode.